which stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, so I think everybody kind of knows everybody here. I'm Jim Craig, the chairman of the Select Board. And last night, most of you were here the first time, too, and we'd like to kind of do the same thing, except that we have like 4 topics that we would like to throw out, and each one of us is going to do a topic, and Mark is here to answer all the hard questions. And then after that, we're looking for a good discussion on any of the topics that we had, and anything else that you are concerned about. Our goal is still to go into the budget season as friends working towards the same goal, not as enemies trying to one-up each other or whatever. That's really the goal here. And if we don't do anything else, at least we get to know each other a little better here, and that's beneficial. So, and then after we finish, if Liz wants to say anything, that's fine. And again, it's very informal. I like it to be that way, anyways. And whatever is, if you have a better idea from what you hear from us, please let us know. We're not hurting feelings or anything like that. We're looking for the best solutions to the budget for this year. So, okay? All right. So, I'm going to start off with a little bit of the 26 default budget and the 26 projected tax rate. Then Allison's going to do the fund balance available and changes to the fund balance policy that we have been working on. And then Richard is going to explain our directions to the department heads about the 2027 budget. And then Josh is going to finish up with vehicle leasing and finance options and capital reserve funds. So those are the topics that we've been working on a little bit. So here we go. The impacts of the 2026 default budget. The Select Board and the department heads have watched expenses closely in 2026 to respond to potential issues as they rise. Select Board and the department heads continue to monitor under and over expenditures. The board has developed a project list of necessary items that may warrant budget line transfers in September through December of 2026. Some of the results of the last budget, the default budget, is initially, right off the bat, we transferred $130,000 from reclamation to address shortfalls in fire overtime. We also transferred $100,000 from reclamation to address shortfalls across the departments. That was a pot of money, the only pot of money that was available at the time, and so we had those needs, and that's what we did. The police canceled National Night Out and made cuts to equipment and supply lines. Public Works reduced roadside mowing and line striping. They prioritized maintenance on high-traffic roads and intersections to maintain safety standards. The library reduced expenditures on electronic subscriptions and publications. And non-union employees received no wage increases, no steps, and no COLAs. Non-union employees were also subject to an increase in employee portion of health increases. So that also reduced their take-home pay. The projected tax rate. In October, the Select Board will work with town staff and the New Hampshire Department of Revenue Administrator to set the 2026 tax rate, as you know. The Select Board anticipates both the local education and county property tax portions of the tax rate will increase this fall. County budget passed in June requires a 10% increase in the county tax collection. The Goffstown School District budget and the teachers' CBA both passed at town meeting. The school district indicated that if both passed, which they did, there would be an increase of the net local education taxes of approximately $2.5 million. That's a 7.9% increase. The actual increase will depend on the amount of fiscal year '26 fund balance returned by the school and their final revenues. And the property tax, the town staff is projecting no increase to the town tax rate, but this will depend on the final meals and rentals and highway block grant from the state. The town's revenues, revised revenues increased $247,436, which is a 3.36% increase, and that was mostly for motor vehicle registrations, recycling, and tax interest and penalties. And the increase in the town's total valuation from new construction increased 1.3%. So the main issue is with local education and county tax collecting likely increasing. The town rate projected to be stable.
Tim, may I just add one thing? We did send a letter to the county on that tax increase.
We did do that,
Yeah,
yeah.
we basically told them that we weren't happy with it, but we have no say on that, specifically on that county tax rate. I know that our representatives here also contributed their feedback on not supporting that as well. But ultimately, it's all of the representatives that vote on that within the commission. So,
Yeah, I will just pipe in that I did read the letter during the budget, debate. I read your letter
To the,
during the budget debate and made the point.
okay.
So
Thank-
isn't it
thank you.
true that, I'm sorry, but isn't it true, I mean, the county commission, the county is basically run by the 3 county commissioners? Isn't that correct? I mean, I know that the reps get a say, but they're the ones who are really calling the shots, aren't they?
The county commissioners run the county. The budget process goes through a executive committee, which results of, I think, 11 legislators or 12 from the county. And then the entire budget goes through a full county delegation vote, which is every state rep in the county.
Okay,
And they meet once, right?
What?
The full delegation meets once at the end, right, to
Yeah,
to vote.
there's, everybody's assigned to subcommittees, similar to the way we do our process. And then we meet once and have a final vote.
okay. But the county commissioners do have some say in this. There's 3 of them, and they are all elected officials.
Yes.
So I don't know how many of them are up for election this year? All of them? All of them every year, okay. So that's something that voters might want to pay attention to. And how many Goffstown reps are on that executive council or executive committee?
The last rep that was on the executive committee was Fred Platt last term. We don't have anybody.
So we don't have anybody. So
On the committee, yeah.
we have the majority of all the county offices, we have all of that, and we don't have a rep on that commission. Okay. Thank you. I'm not blaming you, John. Thank you for the information. Believe me, I know you're doing everything you can.
I'll sign up next year. How's that sound?
Can I go back to the county tax increase, please? I apologize if you covered it. There was a lot of information after it, but what was the county pointing to as the main driver for that 10% increase?
Do you know, Joe?
We don't know.
Okay, we don't know. All right.
Hold on, hold on.
Hear it and forget it.
Hold on, James. I think we might know.
Maybe Josh knows.
No, so as he was saying, it was the new jail, but that's not the new jail. So even if it's a comment, it has nothing to do with the budgetary, this increase. I believe that they are stating that inflationary cost was one of them, correct?
Yeah, it's
Joe?
an increase in nursing home expenses as well.
Which sits in our town.
Yes, and I've had multiple conversations with the county administrator about the amount of calls that our department does for the county nursing home. And I've been told that those calls are decreasing because they need to realize that you can't just call for any reason whatsoever in the county. Just educating county staff on when you should call Goffstown Fire, Goffstown EMTs, and when you shouldn't. So I think some of those calls are going down, but it's been a struggle for years about going to nursing home.
I think the calls have gone down because we've worked out some agreements between the fire department and the county nursing home. So that's gone down. But ultimately, I think the costs are going up collectively, not necessarily just because of the county, but because of some of their spending that they need and some of revamps, I think was some of it, right, Derek, when we went through some of those pieces?
Yes, and I know. Yes, they also have collective bargaining agreements
Yes.
that have gone into effect that may have impacted their overall tax collection.
Okay.
And so those would have been voted on by
James
the
Pierce.
delegation as well, right, Derek? So all the CBAs would have been voted on by all the representatives too.
Okay.
Sorry, just keep me honest on this. So, and we do not get any property tax income from any of that county land and the buildings on it. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, now, we'll do the fund balance, and Allison's going to do that.
I get to talk about everyone's favorite topic of conversation, the unassigned fund balance. So last night, during the select board meeting, we took a look at the policy that the previous select board had put together, and the changes that we made to it were, we wanted to make note that we had heard and understood the voters. Just over half of them voted that they'd like to see the unassigned fund balance at 10%. So we decided the changes we'd make in that policy were that it previously had a minimum balance. We moved it from 12% down to that 10%. We had a target of 16% that has been completely removed, so we don't have that target anymore at all. But we decided to instead put that as a maximum of the unassigned fund balance would be at 16%. Those are kind of the big changes that we made in there. But we also kind of want to talk about what, right now, at tax rate setting time, we're going to have about $9 million in the unassigned fund balance. A couple things I want to remind everybody that doesn't equate to $9 million of cash sitting there. There are receivables in there. There's things to consider. It's not just cash sitting there. And that $9 million has accumulated over decades. This is not $9 million from the last year of the taxpayers putting in money. This is an accumulation for an extremely long time. So if we were to, I'm sorry, a couple of other things I just want to talk about. So the unassigned fund balance, one of the major uses of it is that we have to float all the expenses for the town. So the school, paying the county, paying the state, all of their funding, no matter when we get paid. So we get big chunks twice a year at tax collection time. But in the meantime, we have to take the money we previously collected and spread it out really slowly. So think about getting a paycheck twice a year and then having to work really closely with your budget to make sure that you don't run out of money until the next time you get paid. Thankfully, the school is a really great partner with the town, and they've done a good job of timing stuff and talking to each other and when money's coming in and when they're going to need it, and adjusting even sometimes what they would do. But this past July, so previously we had about 13% was the unassigned fund balance. This past July, as we were getting before our next big bump, our investment fund for the town got down to $1.5 million in our investment account, which still seems like a very large number, but one big thing goes wrong in any, at the school or in the town, and we're getting ourselves into a pretty precarious financial situation. So we just want to make people aware of what the fund balance is used for. And also point out that based on our current level of investment, we made this past year $500,000 in interest from keeping that, $9 million in an investment account. And it makes interest, when you first get all the real estate taxes, you make less and less, but through the year, we made $500,000, which cannot be used for any purpose other than to reduce the tax rate. That's the only thing it can be used for. So I think that's pretty good. One of the things that we had discussed last night was so with the $9 million left over, if we were to take that down to the 10% that people keep talking about, that would leave us about $2 million to do something with. And one of the ideas that we had floated was actually using that to fund capital reserve funds, which again was a thing that a lot of people last year, especially during deliberative, kept saying, why aren't we saving for these things? And we don't disagree, but really that was a conversation that should have happened on the last 15, 20 years. We should have been saving for things. But that might be a good opportunity to fund those capital reserves funds, get them a good little nut to start, and then those would still be making interest for the town, so you're not losing it on the $500,000, or it wouldn't be the full 500, but a good portion of interest income. if the money is in a CRF, that interest actually stays in the CRF. So it helps it grow to even more that we can use on those individual projects. We'll talk about what we kind of had for possibilities of CRFs. Josh is going to touch upon that later. But that's kind of the big picture of what we were talking about with the unassigned fund balance.
I think the risk though, Allison, right, if we take all 2 million, and if we got down to a 1.5 million before, there's potential we could actually be drawing down past
Right.
that point, which means that there's potential that we could get into a place where it could end up, hey, we need a loan to
We
pay
have to
some of this
get a
while
loan.
we wait for the taxes
Uh-huh.
to come in. So there is that risk of doing that. And I think that's something that ultimately we should discuss as we get further along and think about the CRFs. Like what makes sense in making that a reality? Because, and Allison pointed out, but I want to reemphasize it again, which is that unassigned fund balance isn't just for the town, like departments. It's for the school. It's for, paying all these other things that come in, like county taxes, whatever that come through. That has to get paid out. And when we have to take out of that pool, it means we're not making the same amount of interest when it's all there. I think that's what you're trying to say, Allison, right? Like, when we get down to that 1.5, we're making an interest on 1.5. We're not making interest on 9.
Right.
We're making interest on 1.5.
How much is in the operating account?
Honestly, it changes.
So it's going to change depending on the time of year, and obviously it moves around each month. We remit about $4 million a month to the school, but our operating account floats around 2 to 3 depending on what time of month it is, what payments are being made. We pay out to New Hampshire Retirement System, we pay out to Health Trust, so that some of those monthly expenses depending on when they hit.
Is there a select board policy on the amount that we make annually in interest?
Not that I'm aware of. I don't know. Derek?
There is an investment policy, and the finance office invested. We're very limited in what we can invest by New Hampshire state law, but typically, after tax bills come in, it gets moved over to an account that has more interest bearing. So that's something that our treasurer does.
So if it can only be used for tax relief, is that correct?
The interest.
The
Interest,
interest
yes.
can only be used for tax relief, so it goes into basically a restricted fund?
No, the interest that we earn throughout the year is one of our revenues. So when you look at the budget, it's an offsetting revenue. So we have about $500,000 that comes into the general fund every year. And that's offsetting taxes that we would have to collect. So if you draw down that fund balance, that $500,000 is going to start reducing, and then you'll have to collect additional taxes to offset the appropriation.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah. So it's a conscious thought of what happens with that money. Like you can reduce it and do a one-time, payback. That's going to be a one-time payback, and then ultimately the next year we're going to end up having to collect more taxes. There will only be no offset at that point in time.
So there are other towns that have very low fund balance, less than $1 million. They don't get interest on investments, or if they do, it's only for that month after you collect taxes before you turn it over to the county and the school. And they have borrowing costs. They have to take out tax anticipation notes, and they have, not only they have the finance charges for that, but they have to have council review, because you have to have town council review any of those agreements. So they have an additional cost that we do not have.
Okay, so, and I'm not advocating that we run down the fund balance. I'm just trying to understand this little piece of it, because if it can only be used for tax relief and we invest it, we're going to make the interest on that, we'll make interest on that investment, but that principal, and if we're adding to it year after year, can never be used for anything but tax relief.
So that the interest comes into the general fund every year.
Okay.
It does not accumulate into that
It
account.
doesn't accumulate. It doesn't stay with the fund balance. It's a revenue. So it's cash that's received during the year, so that at the end of the year, it's an asset. So,
But it's a restricted asset.
no,
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 just the interest.
it's just cash.
Okay, I'm confused by that.
Peter?
So I was just going to say, so when we're looking at our budget for next year's operating budget.
You'll
and I'm
see a
looking at
line for.
revenue.
Yep,
I see, so it's built into our operating budget.
yeah,
So
for
we're
next
not
year.
moving it to an investment account?
no,
We're not moving
Not
the
the
interest is being moved out as income.
Okay, I thought that's
essentially.
what you said, is that
Right.
that 500,000 gets moved to an investment account and gets reinvested.
no, I'm sorry, it's in the investment account and then it comes
But
over.
it always goes into the town budget, so it's always going towards, in effect, tax relief.
Yes.
Yep,
Okay, now that makes sense to me. That's where the confusion was.
Yeah, so DRA, every year when they're doing the tax rate setting, they ask us how our interest has been tracking, because obviously as the market changes throughout the year.
Right.
They want to know, are we close to our prediction? Did we get more or less than we thought? They take that into account and directly impact how much we're taking for taxes. So if we said we were going to collect 500,000 and we came in short, they're going to increase how much you have to collect on taxes by the amount that it's short, or vice versa. So if our interest is doing better, they will reduce our appropriation that we need to collect by the exact amount of how much better we're doing.
Okay, so 10 years or so ago, the select board used to put like 300,000 or 400,000 in the budget for tax relief from the unreserved fund balance. Was that this money, or was that in addition to
that's
this
in addition,
money?
they're spending down fund balance. Because again, you can only spend fund balance 3 ways, that is one of the ways. When the select board sets the tax rate, the town portion of the tax rate in October, they're going to be asked that question, do you want to use any fund balance to reduce the town portion, the town tax rate? Not the big tax rate, but the town portion of
Right.
it. And they will have that choice, they have that choice every year.
Okay, okay. That makes sense to me.
Anybody else? Okay, next we will have budget goals for department heads. And Richard?
Over here. So, I guess this will probably be a little bit briefer than the previous few points, just because there's less background information to give. But we wanted to come more, or at least come into our own budget process a little bit closer to where we ended up after the budget committee had their say last year. So, to start off with, Josh had suggested a 5% target, and I suggested a 7% target. That 2% difference has now kind of been built into a range where items that could either smooth out the budget or are just being flagged more for discussion. But the thing that I want to emphasize is that this is a starting point for the select board's review. We've given the direction to the department heads. All of their must-haves, all of their needs have to be captured within a 5% increase over the current appropriation. Then the select board gets our hand on it, and then we would send it on to the budget committee. Other thing that we should flag is that there are still capital projects in the CIP portion of the operating budget that are going to need careful attention because they've been cut out of the town budget for 3 consecutive years, and the need for maintaining aging buildings, the fleet, and the road network hasn't gone away just because we haven't funded them.
At what level are you asking for that 5%? Is it there, like, fire, don't come in with a bottom line for fire at 5% or higher, or is it specifically like line by line?
It's
If those are
departmental needs are supposed to be captured in a bottom line 5% over our current appropriation.
5% of operational budget, Peter.
5% of operational budget, yes. Separating out capital expenditures, which, you know, we kind of just touched on in saying that the CIP portion is going to need careful attention.
And that operational cost includes, you know, the CBA increases that are in there. It also is going to include the non-union increases. So I want to make sure that we're very clear in that the operational budget last year that got put down default removed any of the merit increases for those that are not in the union, as it was pointed out before. I know that at the election time, after the budget was voted down, several people came to me and basically said, oh, but everybody will still get their raise. That's not the case. If we go to the default, non-union employees will not get a raise. So I want to make that very clear, because it was not clear to people, even a person that was on the budget committee last year, no longer here, made that comment to me as well, and I said, no, that's not correct.
So it's not just merit raises, it was cost of living increases as well.
Yeah, because the health insurance actually went up as well. The premiums basically increased as part of that. So basically, people got a decrease in take-home pay because of it. So not only did they not get a merit increase, those that weren't union also got a decrease in take-home pay because of the health insurance increases.
Okay.
Okay, and the last one we have is Josh is going to talk about the new items the select board is looking at this year.
Thanks, Chair. As you've already heard, we're looking at the operational and basically the capital expenditure slightly separate. So we're trying to figure out how we can smooth out some of those capital expenditures, basically the vehicles as such. And that comes through looking at the vehicle purchases in a couple ways. Straight out purchases, which we've been doing, which is capital expenditure. We've also been looking at leasing options, and some of those have been, 3 years, looking at other programs such as Enterprise, which basically do a complete fleet management aspect. And we've also looked at financing as well. A lot of the vehicles, like when you think about the police cruisers, the fire operational vehicles, they all have uplift charges too. So we're not talking about just the vehicles themselves. We're also talking about additive costs, painting, adding on lights, those sort of things also have to accumulate as part of that as well. And what we've started to do, at least in the DPW area, because it seems to be the one that comes around and there's a discussion the most, is that we've really started to introduce a concept of looking at more of this traditional capital expenditure and seeing how we can do a lease or a rental process as well. So in one of our meetings this year, if you were watching, we discussed I want to say trash compactor, the waste pickup vehicles, the recycle trucks. We authorized to sell one of those to go from 4 to 3. To basically reduce some of the maintenance costs on that, and we have a rental vehicle that's on standby that's sitting at the transfer station. We'd like to explore that a little bit further and see if we can go down this path, because there is a process where those vehicles, for instance, can be changed out every few years, and we're not incurring some of the maintenance costs that we have been, like replacing the arms, fixing things like the engines, the transmissions, those sort of things. But we will still be responsible for tires, pretty much any wear and tear items, windshield wipers, those sort of things. Those still will be our responsibility from a maintenance perspective if we go down that path.
So preventative maintenance.
Preventative maintenance, exactly. But we would recommend, and we do feel that it's the right way, with police cruisers, we basically have a continuous model right now where we pick 3 every year. It's already in the default budget. And it seems to be pretty consistent in a flat line of basically like growth, or at least a very small amount. Basically, we're trying to smooth that curve out over time, if that makes sense, not having huge purchases. So that's where we are on the vehicles. Really the ones up for next year that are ones that pay attention for us would be the DPW ones. The fire CIP vehicle, which would be like one of the command vehicles, isn't set to go until the following year. I'll pause there on the vehicles and see if you have any questions before we get into the...
Can I give input on it?
Absolutely.
Because I know we talked about it. So the lease option, you can absolutely add in upfitting costs. So if you put a utility body, strobes, all those things, depending on your specs per department. So I think that is a good way to smooth costs instead of having that big purchase. And then also with a fleet management company, they'll track utilization, engine hours, mileage, so that they can help keep track of when we actually should be replacing vehicles. Because obviously, police cruisers are going to have higher engine hours because they're idling. And then we would still retain value. So say we lease for 5 years. At the end of your lease, you own that vehicle. So they'll give you market value. You can either sell it or roll into the next lease. So there's a lot of options. I think it's better smoothing out the cost-wise. It might be a little more expensive than just paying for it, but when we're looking at all the other things we need to do, I think it would be beneficial to dig deeper into it.
So, oh, go ahead.
I was just going to say, Jessica's right, it is better at smoothing out, and she did mention the additive cost, so what we saw in some of the financials, just so everybody is aware too, we pay 1x, basically the value now in the capital expenditure process. It's a large chunk of money, but if we start to go to the leasing or the rental model and the amount of years that we keep, there's a couple things to keep in mind, just so that way you guys are thinking about this. One is that we pass cars down. They basically may start off at the police station, they end up going to another department and then another one. Basically keep them about 10 to 12 years is how long we're keeping some of those vehicles. So we're getting good long use out of them. If we go to the leasing model, you have the option to hand them down. Jessica and I had good conversations about that. I think most of those typically last somewhere around 7 years, I think, collectively, not the 12 years. The cost basically can go anywhere from like 1.3, depending upon the number of years, all the way up to like 1.7 or 1.8, the value of the vehicle. So we could be paying much more for that vehicle over a period of time. It may be smoother. So those are things to take into account as well. My recommendation, and I think from the discussion of the board, we wouldn't recommend that we jump into a full fleet management in year one. We should start to transition into that a little bit at a time, so that way we can test it out and then start to get to a good place.
And I think with the cost, if you look at maintenance costs of keeping a vehicle 12 years, that's where it's going to even out, because depending on what vehicle and what you're doing, upfitting, whatever's on it, or replacing an engine because it's been idling for so many hours, that's where we'll save money. Because if you have a good replacement schedule and you have somebody helping you with that, you're not going to be paying those high repair costs when a vehicle gets really old. So it's also good to look into. If we're passing vehicles down to DPW, but the expense for all the repairs on such an aged vehicle is more than it would be to have a newer vehicle.
And I think that's why we think that the trucks that we've already identified at DPW make a lot of sense, because we are putting some big repairs into them. And we probably should transition them out a little bit more. So, and they're bigger cost to the town. Whereas like the police cruisers really aren't as large a cost as some of these other vehicles that are costing a few $100,000.
Yeah. And, I mean, the mechanic's time. Instead of having to do huge repairs on all these vehicles, they can focus on the heavy equipment and things like that.
Yeah, most of the heavy repairs don't happen here in town. They actually happen at other contractors anyways. So it would
maybe
make
we could
sense.
pull that back in.
So we pull some of that back in. Most of our repairs are going to be on like the Fords, the Chevys, the smaller vehicles. And typically it's not going to be engine work. So like we have to rebuild an engine, that typically is going outside of the DPW. Transmission work is going outside of the DPW. Any heavy vehicles that have springs, that's typically going outside of the DPW. That's not necessarily staying in the maintenance anyway. So we're giving money to somebody else.
That's more of a reason to look at it then, because pulling that work back in will save.
I think specifically for those larger vehicles, it makes a lot of sense.
Okay.
Okay.
Well, so I just want to clarify. I know this is your area of professional expertise, Jessica, and I know you guys have done a really deep dive into this summer. I want to make sure, I mean, this was a great discussion, but I want to make sure we have to come to some sort of resolution. And these kind of things, for me, it seems like the numbers don't lie. I mean, the numbers are going to say what the numbers are going to say. And we have to go with that. But what I don't want to happen, what has happened previous years, is we have this discussion, we go one way, and the other person takes to Facebook and say, oh, they're just throwing money out, they're just burning piles of money over there, because it didn't actually get resolved.
Well, no, I think we need a cost analysis. How much are we spending on repairs on aged vehicles?
So can I ask you, have you followed this summer, what they've done already?
Yeah.
Okay, so it hasn't been resolved to your satisfaction, is what you're
Well, no,
telling me.
I mean, we need actual prices, so we need quotes from the fleet management side as far as what a lease would cost, and then maintenance costs, like what are we outsourcing, what are we doing in-house, and where can we save, even if we do have to pay a little more on the lease side, but we save on the maintenance, we're
So
gonna have
have
to
we
get all
not,
those.
do we not have that?
We have some of those numbers already. In fact, the packets that the select board looked at did have those numbers and estimates for the maintenance and the
Okay.
time. So, and that's probably stuff that we can bring back to the budget committee, Derek, like when we. Okay.
And then, if you give me a list of all the vehicles, year, make, model, I can talk with Fleet and get actual numbers of what it would cost per month to lease. And then put those with all the maintenance records, so that we can actually come to the table with numbers.
I'm sorry,
upfitting
Danielle, what was
costs?
that?
Okay.
So it sounds like they've already got some of this information. You still are asking for a little bit more information. What I want to get at the end of the day is a resolution. So I want you to be proactive in getting the information you need. And I'm sure they're going to be responsive, and I think that they've already done some of this research. But I don't want to be arguing about this in January, and I do not want to see an argument on Facebook about this, because I am done with Facebook. This is where we have these arguments. So that would be great, if you guys figure out a resolution and a recommendation that could be presented to the committee.
Yeah, I think we can come back with those numbers, the committee.
Okay. All right, thank you.
And Adam is available.
Yeah, Adam can answer a lot of questions on the DPW side, which is where we've been focusing as well. Cool, is that good on the vehicles? Any other questions? All right, awesome. And then our last meeting, we talked about capital reserve funds. The town heads have done a good job. They came up with a plan around each one of the departments and where they could see CRFs collectively. But last night, I think we honed in on selective areas that we could think about. One of them being town facilities. We have a number of facilities that have needs for repairs, that have been needing for some period of time, including some leaks in roofs and, rotting out walls. Like, it's a good time. But what we want to make sure is that when we think about that, is that we don't think about a single building, but collectively like all of the buildings when we think about that CRF. And what we would also provide with that, and I know we did it with some of the other CRF suggestions, is basically how much we think we should put into each one of these CRFs, the first one being the town, and then what we think ultimately the pro forma would look like over a couple of years. Some of that may come from unassigned fund balance in the first year, and depending upon how much we take out of the unassigned fund balance, could be in the second year. But ultimately, at some point in time, just let's talk about town facilities for a moment, would require taxation to go into those CRFs. Because we would start to pull out of the unassigned fund balance and get down to a place where we need to keep that for, risk reduction and keeping that level there, as well as, as we talked about with Allison, like using that funding to pay other things in town until we do the collection of taxes. But at least with those CRFs, they would continue to grow over a period of time with interest. So another one that we also discussed was the police station replacement and rehabilitation. Basically putting forward some money initially out of the unassigned fund balance to allow us to do like planning, because that does cost money and that does take capital. It would also allow us, should we ever get to a place where we need to take a bond, because this town has not traditionally taken bonds, where we would start to smooth that process out and get a new facility built, that we would start to put some money in there too, maybe for a down payment or something else, that it could also be used as part of that process. But again, both of these two that we're talking about here would also be individual votes. So taxpayers could vote on each CRF and the allocation in that, okay? The next one would be bridge replacement and rehabilitation. The bridge replacement or update this year has been quite an eye-opener, I think, for many of us. I think we're looking at, almost $160,000 that's cost collectively, and as we've asked more and more questions. Some of this has been gathering supplies over the last few years to actually do this, so the cost actually could be more than what we think, because we've had to basically start to plan out multiple years in ahead to get that bridge done. We also, in order to make sure that it was on time, had to use third party for like a welder and all kinds of other stuff that came along in this. And, the select board, for instance, approved an additional $10,000 to go ahead and move it faster if we had to, just so that way we could be open on time. So it was a lot of work, I think, before, with DPW, police department, everybody getting everything together for that bridge, but it was also a lot of work on the select board side to make sure that we stayed on time and providing guidance on that front. This would help out with that in planning in years. The last one, which would be the town technology. So we keep our technology, the switches and all that gear, much longer than most commercial companies do. We actually keep it for about 7 years, but as this equipment gets older and older, the cost of that equipment goes up, which means that we're outlaying a lot of capital. And we all know that we're connected in the world today. Those switches, computers, and everything cost a lot of money, and it's something that we have to continuously replace and update in order to stay up to date. Let's see. The last point I'd like to make before any questions is that we definitely think that unassigned fund balance is a mechanism to start all of these funds. Because otherwise, the only other way to start the funds is through taxation. And to get these in place and start a true opportunity for planning in town, it is going to require us to suggest those unassigned fund balance used to be able to update these. So I'll pause there and see if there's any questions on the CRFs.
Not a question so much as an additional point to that, what Josh just said. Using the unassigned fund balance to fund the CRFs kind of marries the goal of getting down to that 10% in the unassigned fund balance that voters want, but doing it in a smart way that doesn't, skipping that, doing it in a smart way that still protects that interest revenue. Because taking that unassigned fund balance, putting it directly into a CRF allows it to continue generating interest, where using it once for tax relief feels good at the time, but doesn't help in the long run.
I feel like, didn't we just buy a fire truck? And I feel like there was a post from the fire department that stated how much interest we had earned on that money over the years that we've been saving it. I can't remember what the number is off the top of my head, but to go to your point, right? So we're earning interest on the CRF that went towards the purchase.
We are, and it helps, but we're also seeing, some increases occurring too, with private equity owning these companies and the inflation of materials, that those costs of fire engines are continuously going up as well.
Right.
So that again means that we have to start planning these things out multiple years in advance, because it takes 2 to 3 years to replace those, but you are right, Elizabeth, those do provide interest for us, and since that's not going right back into the general fund and a tax offset, it creates that planning cycle that we need for the future.
Right. I had a question about the bridge replacement and rebuild. I mean, I know we have a lot of bridge work. Every town in New Hampshire has a lot of bridge work to do. That recent veto override that happened, is that money going to, are those state bridges, or are they talking about sending some of that money to the towns? Do you know? It's new, Derek, so you may not have heard yet.
I can't answer specifically, to be honest with you. There has been, I know, a couple years ago, the legislature had a separate bridge funding, which a lot of that did go towards Henry Bridge Road. And there is bridge funding available. They do have, but it takes a while to get into the 10-year plan for those type of bridge replacements. And it's my understanding that the state really focuses on those red-listed bridges, not necessarily ones that may need regular maintenance.
Do we have any red-listed bridges?
We do have one red-listed bridge, but it's the reason it's red-listed is pretty minor. It has to do, I believe, with the guardrail that's on it. So I think it's a little bit less severe than it could have been. So,
Okay.
but we do have
Okay.
one.
Any other questions? Okay.
Okay, does anybody, yeah, Joe?
Thank you. First of all, I want to thank the select board. There's been a lot of really great research done to this, and I'm actually going into budget season a little more optimistic than I thought I would be. First, I want to thank you guys for listening about the unreserved fund balance, unassigned fund balance. I think that 10% is entirely reasonable, and we've always had a conversation in Budget Committee about 16%. Why? I know there's a DRA recommendation, but the voters said 10, and I think that's still a responsible place to go. So that leaves us with that I'm going to say 2 million, but it could be a little less, a little more. But I'm also very optimistic, you talking about leasing for the trash trucks. I was always confused, trash trucks, like renting, but I was always confused why there were 4 when there's 2 on, 2 off kind of thing. And I think that this is a really great way to save costs, but also like get what we need done. And then I also like what Richard Manzo said about the 5% target sitting on the budget. So I'm very optimistic all around of this budget cycle. Regarding the CRFs, I would say I'm in on 3. The police replacement, I understand, the police station replacement, I understand they've deferred a lot of maintenance on their building so that they could eventually get a new police station. I think we need to talk about as a town if we're even gonna like go forward with it and make a decision either way. And before we do that, then I can't support anything until we've decided if we're definitely gonna do it or if we're not gonna do it. And, if we have a town facility CRF, maybe throw a little more money in there and use it towards rehabbing the existing building the where it is. So I think that's a conversation we need to have as a town before we even dive into investing into a CRF. And I see on the agenda one budget committee representative for the planning committee, but I'm not volunteering, I'm just saying.
Oh.
So thank you.
So, if I may,
Good job.
on the police station, we have formed a committee, and I do think that there are a number of repairs that need to occur at the police station. I think that most of us agreed, and the former police chief came out and actually said, we want the police station to be visible, right? But we're limited on the amount of space that we have at that location. I think the committee members that have been assigned may be able to think outside of the box. I've talked to a few of them already as well. They'll give us the recommendations, I think, on what they believe will happen, but the only way to make that happen is to have some money to put forward for some of those designs and the feedback, because it does cost money for those engineering firms to provide us something. We should update and provide new capabilities for the police station. I think some things have been suffering for a while. The locker rooms, the facilities for fitness, the ability to actually have, meetings with other police stations, they all just don't exist right now in a good standing.
Allison?
Can I also add on to that? The idea of the CRF, and we made specifically, when we spoke about it, was that it could be for the building of a new police station or renovations.
Yep.
So if we put the money in, and again, some of it, yes, was used to figure out what we could do, the money wasn't just going to sit there or disappear. It could then be used if we decided we were not building, but those things that do need to be fixed in the police station specifically, the funds could be used for that too. So I get your point, but it was certainly not just a straight, it's for the police station to be built.
Exactly.
It was
No, I understand.
renovations too.
And this is my 9th year on the committee, and I know how these committees work, and the ad hoc committee is going to recommend a new police station. I just know that. Like, that's how these things work. You establish the committee, you spend money on all this engineering. I'm saying, why can't the police refab be under town facilities repair instead of creating a whole new CRF for a decision that hasn't been made by the town yet? That's, and for the record, I would say by the town as in like the voters, like the people that turn out.
This isn't really, I guess, more of an answer to your question, but just like in the defense of a police building CRF, I know that when the library was applying for an LCHIP grant, we didn't have a library CRF, and it made applying for that grant harder. Obviously, I'm projecting into a police building grant that currently, I don't know if it exists, but if it does, and we were to try to get that, having a police station CRF will probably make applying for that grant easier.
Well, I mean, LCHIP is entirely different.
No, but I'm saying that most grants probably work in a similar fashion.
You would need community buy-in, which is
Correct.
what that grant showed. So I'm saying if the community voted on town warrant day that they wanted a police station, that would probably be enough evidence than even creating a CRF itself.
Right, but I mean, if they have the buy-in for a CRF, then that would make that grant writing process easier.
Well, I think we're getting into a chicken and an egg situation here. And I think what Joe is trying to say is that maybe I don't know whether if it's a CRF or not, or a separate warrant article, but maybe you figure out how much money do we need to invest to figure out what we're going to do. and have that be like a discrete vote, like that, and a discrete amount, whatever it is. I'm just making up a number. We need $500,000 to figure out what we're going to do. Make that be the limit, and then you have the community conversation and the community vote, because you can't do it now because nobody knows what they're voting on. So,
Yeah, and I'm just going to state it very clearly. That police station needs to be revamped. The jail cells there are not adequate. And the only way to do that is to knock them out in some way, shape, or form. You cannot drive back there with a cruiser safely and be able to put people in and out in a proper way. They've had incidents where they've actually had car damage back there. The holding cells are not modernized. There's a lot of things that cannot just be cleaned up in that police station. I also emphatically trust our chief in his direction and his fiduciary responsibility. He is absolutely not asked for things, and he's focusing on what he believes is the most important one. So I would say we should take the time to understand the cost, as you're saying, Elizabeth, which means that we have to put some money there to understand what that would be. And then that is the actual vote and what we should be going after at that point in time, which we do not have clear understanding. I personally, not speaking on behalf of the select board, do not agree with us putting it down by the DPW because it would be way, way, way more expensive than what it is now. And I do, knowing who some of the committee members are, trust that they are going to have some pushback on certain things based upon talking to them already. So I would trust that committee, and Joe, I would recommend that you be on it if you have some feelings about it, and raise your hand for it.
yeah, I was actually hoping you were volunteering, to be honest.
I don't have enough going on.
I know.
But, yeah, I mean, no one at all is doubting that the police station needs a lot of work. And I think, and I emphatically trust the chief too. I think the department is run incredibly well. And I've known just the long-term strategy of the police department in general was to defer maintenance on the building to a point where the town says, you know what, let's just do a new police station. That's just the direction I know it's going. And, there's been conversations about, why it's putting on county land, putting everywhere. But I guess what I'm saying is, before we do a CRF, let's do a separate warrant article for the amount of money it will take for us to figure out what we don't know about it before we do a CRF on something that we might not even pursue.
Didn't we see some plans along the way? Yeah, there were some plans done already, like they determined that they can't build a second floor without taking the whole thing down.
100%.
Structurally, it won't happen. And the cost of renovating the existing building, what are you going to do with the police station while you're renovating the building and think is enormous. And there is some data on all that stuff already, but I'm not saying that we're ready to go with that yet, but it's been done.
But we would need a CRF regardless, as Allison was pointing out, in order to do repairs on some of those, because some of them would be tens of thousands of dollars. And I think thank you, Allison, for clarifying that. Maybe I was emphasizing too much the police station, but it is a joint CRF.
No, I'm all in with the town facility CRF. I think that's a great idea. The school does the same thing. Yeah, I don't think there's any problem with that.
No, I mean, the CRF for the police station would be a joint for repair and for any planning that we would need to do in order to get, it's a joint one, yes.
So I was just going to say, but what are your thoughts from anyone on select board on Joe's idea of essentially making, sort of, I'm not going to comment on whether or not it should be a CRF or not at this point, the police portion, but taking out the rehab portion of that and saying, yeah, instead we're going to ask for more under town facilities, knowing that we'll use that fund for rehab, and we're going to ask for this, whether it's we're asking for permission to move forward with the plan or asking for funds to plan for a replacement and only have that for replacement. That's essentially what Joe is asking, right?
I'm going to be honest, I think you will be wasting money because ultimately we're still going to get to a place where we're going to have to take down portions of that building.
And I feel like since they have to approve the CRF, right? And if you're clear on what we're doing with the CRF, then you know all of that particular money. The townspeople have spoken on their opinion of you looking into a new police station or renovating with that money that they're approving you to put into the CRF. So it's almost like Joe's looking for them to give an approval before we put money in, but them saying that you can put money into CRF is kind of their approval, like, okay, yeah, we know we need to fix some of those things, or look into how much it would cost for a new police station.
Richard,
think
and then
we
I
do-
have oh, sorry, Peter.
Do you mind if I ask a follow-up to that? Because I really want to make sure I'm understanding clearly the difference, like renovation and rehab. So rehab is us thinking about what we need to do in the meantime to the police station, right? Renovation is us deciding we are not going to move forward with the replacement and we are going to renovate it, right? So I just want to make sure, am I clear on those two terms?
I feel like they're the same term.
No, I think they're the
In
same.
the way
I
I'm
think
using
rehab
it's
and
the same
renovation
term.
are the same term.
Yeah, that, either one of those, like,
They're
we're not really
similes.
fixing a lot of stuff
Yeah.
at the police station unless it gets to a point where we absolutely have to and we're not moving forward with a new one, and then there's going to be lots of things that need to be fixed there.
Okay, so not fixing, I just want to be clear.
Like,
We're not
Eric
fixing the
literally-
cells now.
No, Eric fixes only what he absolutely has to,
Yeah.
minimally. He is trying not to fix anything that
Like,
he
I'll give
doesn't
you
have
an
to.
example of something that probably should occur, that would be a renovation, but it would be on the external part of the building. Right now, they have crushed stone outside. It was pretty bad before where the parking lot was basically slanted, and that, some of that got leveled out. But realistically, that probably should be paved over there. And there should be some drainage put in, those sort of things, so that way people are not slipping and falling going out to their cars.
Voters approved that years ago,
They
and
did.
they just didn't do it. So that's my point, is like, we gotta figure out the direction we're taking this. I would say you put in a separate, this is just me, one member, but you put in a CRF for town facility repairs, everything, holistically, police station, everywhere. And then you put in a separate one about a feasibility study about creating a new police station and see what the voters say. I don't think the voters would have any problem with a CRF for town facilities. Personally, I would not, but.
Okay.
So, okay, Richard has his hand up first, Laura.
No,
so-
my point has been made.
Oh, okay.
So question about that, the feasibility study, because I feel like that's a given, whether it's now or later, before we move forward with the building. But is that just logistically, because I don't know, is that money that would be in a CRF, or is that just a certain amount of money?
No, it'd be targeted specifically for that, so the select board
No.
would get an idea of.
Right, but like, okay, say the warrant is, do you approve $500,000 to move forward with seeing about plans about a police station, whatever? Does that $500,000 go into a CRF automatically for that purpose? That's what that is.
It could, or it could be
She's
separate.
saying it doesn't have to.
It
But
could
Right,
be
it doesn't
another
have to.
just
It could
some
go either
just
way.
ask the taxpayers if they're willing to pay this
Yes.
much to do
We're
that.
arguing a little bit about semantics here.
Right.
I mean,
Okay.
so
I
it's
wanna be
really the
clear
same,
because
we're all
we are
talking
using
about the
different
same
words.
thing. I think we're just talking about what are the voters most likely to approve? And I think to Joe's other point, no matter how much we know that police station needs a lot of work, I don't think the voters in this town have ever approved a purchase more than like 3 million. I think, is that correct, Danielle? Danielle's nodding. I think I'm pretty sure on my math here. Those guys could be having their offices in a tent, and we are still going to have a huge community education buy-in effort to get them to sign off on a bond, because you're absolutely right, Josh. This town does not bond things, which frankly, it used to be a source of pride. Now I think it shows incredible short-sightedness. But it's going to be a big task, and that is kind of what Joe is getting to, I think, is that we can't just go ahead with this, no matter how much we know it's needed. We have to start building that community support, or it's just going to go down in flames.
I would say that warrant article needs to say, like, the amount of money it would take to, I need both options, right? We need to know how much it costs for a police station, right, a new one, and then how much existing repairs cost, and then the town has to decide, but we don't know any of that, right? Like, we know some of the deferred maintenance, but we don't know how much it's cost to level a thing and rebuild it, or to just
We do,
fix
it
what
was,
we have.
yeah, I think it was 20 million alone for the building, not including all the extra infrastructure, correct, Eric?
So, using impact fees, the police station did perform a feasibility study, which was presented to the select board in January of this year. It didn't go into depth, and they looked at building on the existing site and building on some other unnamed, unknown site. Because if you build on the existing site, There's an additional cost to take the police station, move them out for 18 years to 24 months, 18 years, 18 months to 24 years. I mean, right now Salem is doing that, and I think they're spending about $3 million just to house them for 18 months. So the numbers that were presented to the select board based on anticipated growth of population and the anticipated needs of growing sworn officers, as well as dispatch and everything that goes along with it, was $30 to $35 million.
And just to clarify a couple of points that I heard back and forth, if you look back at that select board meeting in January on GTV, the recording, you'll see that they also had some good information, not only from the architectural group that did the feasibility study and the current chief, but also the former chief who was around when that station was built. And he came forward and reminded everybody that that station was built with a 20-year life cycle, and that was it. They used residential grade, they built it undersized, and that has cost us in the long run, to Elizabeth's point, the short-sightedness of that is now that station has been in use for over 40 years, long past its usable life. The existing force that we have doesn't even fit in the building, let alone future expansion if ever that were to be a need. And when you look at what the police department can do with rehab of the building, the current police chief has said, I'm not going to throw good money at bad. And I think that's the point Joe was trying to make. However, he has done as much as he can within the existing structure. He has expanded the detectives division and reorganized a couple of offices over there to better utilize the space. He did expand, he took away an office and expanded the women's locker room because over the course of the last 10 years, we have more female officers than we had before, and it was undersized. So he has done as much as he can within the existing structure, but he has not attacked any sort of project that would go after the roof line as far as changing the exterior of the building, the foundation, the jail cells, because you would literally need to move the foundation and things like that. And that's the project he's holding off on, to say, okay, this is already 20 years past its usable life. Do you really want us to add? And if we do, where do we add? And that's where he was using the feasibility study to get a better understanding of, can we add, in which direction? There's land topography and all kinds of other factors as well. So that's all in that study, and that is in the select board's packet as well as on the GTV site.
Have you guys seen any of that study?
No?
We can
We
distribute
can
that.
make sure to send it out
Yep.
with the link.
Okay.
And, I know there's a lot of Facebook talk. I'm kind of past Facebook too. But
What's Facebook?
yeah. Our town feels extremely safe because of our police officers. We just had 2 select board meetings ago discussions of encampments that are occurring on the rail trail. Police station's taking care of that. A lot of times they take care of things and none of us know. Dealing with drug usage and everything else. They've helped other towns in major drug busts that many of you do not even know that goes on in this town. And they often do it without any sort of acknowledgement of what they do. So to those that are watching, people in this room, you're very lucky you live in this town. We have an amazing police force here.
Okay. We had a few other things. Are there any other comments on all the stuff we've heard tonight? Points of discussion?
So do we agree or not agree on the police?
I think we've given the select board the food for thought.
Okay.
So we don't get to decide that. It kicks back to them, and they get to decide how they want to proceed. But hopefully, they've heard us.
Can I say one more thing? So just thinking about how many questions we had, I think if you put it out there the way we started, the voters are going to have a hard time. They're going to think, oh God, this is X amount of million right now, and they might not say yes. So I think splitting it up, and obviously us explaining and making sure we make it clear what the intentions are.
I think what I heard tonight is that you want to have more understanding of exactly what goes into that CRF and a clear plan of how much is going to be there. That's what I heard from you, correct, Joe, as well?
I would say I wouldn't support a police replacement CRF without first studying how much it costs to replace. I would put that funding in the town facility CRF instead.
So, I hear that, so facility repairs, things like that go in the facility. But if the CRF was for planning and determining the right path, but was set to a certain amount of money, a very low amount of money, not millions, but things that we need to create the proper planning using the committee, which I'm hoping somebody that's passionate here on this budget committee and speak volumes on that committee would also help and guide, that they would come back with an appropriate path. Because, I mean, ultimately, if we ever do put a police station in, it's going to require bonding. Like, it's going to require
Oh, yeah,
bonding.
there's no question.
I mean, you don't need a CRF to have the voters approve the study. I just think we're putting the cart before the horse, so get the study approved for, more information, and then it's like we're approving a project that the voters haven't even weighed in on yet, so.
No, we're approving,
But
we're approving like a savings for it.
But we're trying to make this, correct me if I'm wrong on this, we're trying to make all the CRFs this year to help run down the unassigned fund balance.
It's not
So we
that
can't-
run
Well,
down.
no.
I guess,
I do think, though, that but I think that's a little bit, again, kind of getting the order backwards. I mean, I think you'd have an easier time just getting a straight-up warrant article passed. I think the CRF has a sort of permanence to it, and you don't want to get people going
Gotcha.
that, oh my God, we're going to put money into this thing, and then we don't even know what we're doing, and who knows what's going to happen to it, and I think they're going to feel like they're voting away their choice. Whereas if you do just a straight-up warrant article on the committee and the feasibility to make the decision, you've given them, they still have the option to decide. I think otherwise they're going to feel like,
So what I'm hearing
They've
is the
given you
budget committee as a
pre-approval.
whole would support that more than they would the CRF.
well, just me. I mean, that was just me saying that personally, and
It's like
Joe.
you're splitting it up in little chunks.
That's fine. Joe, would you support that?
I have to look at the warrant article first.
Would you be more supportive of that?
I told you how I felt about the new police station and how to put it. I have to read the article before I can commit to supporting anything.
Laura?
Sorry, there's like too many cooks in
I
the
was,
kitchen.
I was looking over here.
Laura had her hand up.
So that's why I asked the question about, does it have to be a CRF? Can we just put an amount forward for a study so people know? But then are we starting a thing? Do we have to continue it? It just puts it towards the study. But the other thing that, like, for those watching at home, to remember is it's not like we're going to start a CRF and save up for a new police station, right? That's not a thing. So there is going to be a point where if it is decided that that's what we're going for, there is going to be a different way of handling that. We're not starting out now so that in 2,000 years we will have the money to build a police station. Like, just so that's clear, that's not what that would ever be for.
$50,000 a year.
Right, so
So it'd be like towards a down payment or
I don't even know
relocating
if
or-
that is a thing.
It is
For
a thing.
something
You
like
you
that?
could put some money aside as a down payment.
But then, yeah, once it's decided that we're going to move forward because we've done the study and people approve of that, that makes more sense to me as well. So I think I agree with what other people are saying.
I guess I want to try to answer Josh's question, like, in terms of like what kind of support you think you would get. Obviously, we have to go through our deliberations and we have to get the actual presentation. And I think that's the thing we have to remember right now is we're not talking about an actual presentation right now, we're just giving feedback, which I think is important and very good. So I would have to do that, but the threshold to pass in order to support a warrant article for a study versus a warrant article to establish a CRF is lower. The bar, in order to get there, I think is lower. It's because we're not talking about something that continues on. So that would be supportive if the end goal is we truly need X funds in order to move forward with the next step in this process. Whether someone is positive that we need a new police department or not, if you know that that's what you need and you're saying we need X dollars to get there and it's going to help I don't know if anyone has a time machine, because if we could have done this 10 years ago, it would have been even better, but we don't. And every year we don't get that money started, is another year that we have to wait, and another year it becomes more expensive. So if the select board goes back to the table and they say, yes, what our real goal here is, we want to get something moving to move this process forward, and this is what's going to move the process forward, right? Putting a warrant article for a feasibility study, whatever it is. It sounds like we already have a lot of that work done that we need to research. But if that's what you think is going to get the ball moving forward, then that's what I would support. I support anything that is moving us in a smart direction forward.
So, I guess maybe this is more of a question for Joe. Do you remember when, I think that you're looking for a warrant article like we had for the pool a while back, right? Where it was like, does the town want to spend, I think it was $100,000 to do a study on the pool, right? And then that got voted down, and then we never, obviously we didn't renovate the pool. Is that, because I mean, I like that idea too.
Well, I'm thinking even years ago, the library was approved for a study for a new library. They had all the prints, and then the voters ultimately, by a wide margin, decided they didn't want to do it. But we haven't even done the study for the police station yet to even present it as like something that we've done our homework on. So I don't want to go around the voters and say, oh, let's create a CRF for a station that we haven't even studied, if we should even have a station yet.
But I think there's a miscommunication on that. We have done a study on the police station, and we have created that information. It seems
The
like
voters haven't approved you doing a study on the police station.
But the study was already done.
The study was done.
the study's done.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
So do you want a new study with new approval?
I would just put it in front of the voters either way, because this
Then
is a
what are you
large
putting in
commitment.
front of them if the study is done? Like, do you want this study?
The study might have been done, but the decision hasn't been made. The decision about whether we're rehabilitating or replacing hasn't been made.
No, correct, but there's
because-
no decision to be made on a study if it already happened. That people just need to know the facts of the study, the outcome of the study to say,
Okay, but Josh was also talking about engineering plans and surveying. I mean, that takes money too.
Correct.
So we don't have all the information yet that we need to make the decision. So the warrant article and any funds associated with the warrant article would be to get whatever information we need to make the decision. Is that,
Yeah, I think the committee ultimately needs to decide where it's going to occur, right? Plans in that location, if there's land acquisition that's needed, that sort of thing. We got a study on multiple different options for replacement of the police station. And there were discussions of 2 locations where it could go currently. There's been no finalization of that. But there is absolutely a study of how much it would cost, some estimates of certain things that need to go into it. I think that for people in here in the room, we probably should share what does that look like here collectively, since if you haven't seen that, then we can send it. Is it on the webpage as well, somewhere?
It may be, but I think we can send it separately. We can also have GTV cut that specific part of the meeting and share that.
Yeah, I think that would be beneficial, that you get that part, and then I think for the next step, at least what I'm hearing is, we need to define what that next step is, and then that should be basically the warrant article that should be presented, and that basically would be the next step. But I don't want to say that there's no study that has been done. There's definitely a study that's been done. Whether or not it got a vote or not was before some of our times. That occurred out of impact fees, which is allowed to happen.
Yeah, because we're kind of talking on 2 different planes here. We've seen the study, and you guys haven't seen it, so I think it'd be beneficial for you guys to see that the same way we did, because it's more graphic, obviously, and there's a lot of nuts and bolts in there. Whether that's enough to put before the voters, I don't know, but we have a better idea if you see it. I mean,
Well, I think what they're saying is, obviously that study, but we need to know definites, like where would the location be?
right.
And a few more things.
Right, no, I agree with that, yeah.
And that's what the committee would be working on.
Yeah.
I am sorry, I got in late, so I don't know who's running the meeting.
Where
But we don't either.
Just want to make sure, I want to be respectful of both of you. It sounds like we have homework, right? So that's, are we, for budget committee, I'm just going to ask, Elizabeth, are you allowed to just assign us homework and we have to do our homework for the next time we show up?
Oh, my God, wouldn't that be glorious? But
I
I don't
think
think
it's
so.
appropriate.
I don't think I actually have that
You
power.
can make a suggestion.
Well, you can make
I
a
mean, I did
strong
ask Jessica
suggestion.
to do something.
I have a task.
But,
So,
what did you have in mind, Peter?
well, it sounds like, first off, our town administrator is very willing to get us all the information for
Yes.
the information that is already available. There's a very good chance that information is going to help us understand this more than anything, right?
Yeah.
We don't have enough, I do not have enough information to be even having this conversation yet.
Derek has something.
So I might be speaking a little bit out of turn, but the select board has formed an ad hoc committee that will have until this time next year to have a better plan for the future of the police station. This will not be part of budget presentations this fall.
Right.
So
We actually, the budget
so-
committee needs to produce
So I
a
think-
representative for that committee.
So I think we
That's one of our
can
tasks.
absolutely share what has been done so far, so you're aware of that, but the police chief's not going to be coming in here to talk about a bond or, a big ask this year.
Right. So that is one of the things on the agenda tonight. We need to appoint or find a budget committee member, volunteer someone that they're going to serve on this committee. So we need to find that for this ad hoc committee.
What's the ask?
We need
No,
a
I mean,
budget.
what's the
What
ask on
is
the,
the-
what is?
Yeah,
what
what's
is
the
commitment?
The committee is this committee to study the situation with the police station. Are we rehabbing? Are we building? And if we're building, what are we building?
No, right, but are they
When do
meeting
meet?
weekly, or is it
Oh.
just Thursday?
Sorry, I have to think about it.
I'm sorry, I
Other
thought you
things.
meant like a big commitment, like
I
no.
just don't have all the answers.
Think about life.
You want to know when they meet. I don't know when they meet.
They haven't set the meetings yet. It's likely to be once or twice a month, but it's probably going to be once a month and then send members to do homework and research and get back together. So it's going to be look over the most recent feasibility study, as well as there was a feasibility study done in 2017 or 2018 about modifying the existing building, to look at that study as well, to kind of see which different options they are and which way to move forward.
So let me give you guys a little time to think about it, since you're just hearing about this. But I'd like to hear, if you'd like to do this, I'd like to get an email me, or email Danielle, and which will ultimately make it to me. And if you are interested, why don't we do that by Friday? And if I don't get a volunteer, then I'm going to have to ask someone. Josh?
Not to put any competition out there, but I do like competition. The Planning Board and Economic Development Council got this information the same night and made a decision in the same night as who the reps were. So you guys take till Friday, just to let you know.
Well,
that
we
they
have
are-
several members of our committee are not here tonight, and I want to give them a chance to also put their hat in the ring. So let's say that until Friday, end of day Friday, email Danielle, and if you would like to do it. And if, like I said, if I don't get a volunteer, then I'm going to have to start muscling somebody into doing it. Thank you for that segue, Derek. That was actually very timely. Okay. Is there anything more we want to discuss on that topic? Izzy?
I'll do it.
Okay, so you're volunteering? All right, I'm going
I
to put
love
your
it.
name down because I actually did want to give other people who aren't here, like in case Brian or some of the other people, Olivia wants to do it. But Izzy, thank you, and I'm going to put your name down.
It's official. In the legal pad.
Good. Tom.
Yep, it's on my legal pad. Okay, anything else on this topic before we move on to just a few other things? You want me to take
Go
it
ahead.
away?
Yeah,
Okay.
go ahead.
So I did send out an email to budget committee members. All joking aside, the homework piece. So remember, we did decide that we were going to watch the select board presentations because we will not be getting our own presentations this year. So we will watch the select board presentations when they are on. We can either go in person and sit in the room in the audience section, or we can watch it on GTV and we can watch the recordings. Danielle, I think we put all of the select board meetings on our schedule instead of just the ones where they're going to be doing the budget presentations.
Correct.
Can
I
we-
can highlight those, and we were merging our
trying to make sure we knew where
calendars,
everything
yeah.
was. Yep.
So if you could shoot out an email to the committee saying, these are the
They're in
nights that
October.
there will be budget presentations, and everybody will go look at that. We are doing the joint school board presentation with them 2 nights, the first week of October. So those will be in person, and I believe that's here in this room. Although, again, because the school board cannot present a budget to us until after the November election, everything that in their presentation is going to be tentative, right, Vanessa?
Yep, correct. We just talked about that last night.
Okay. So there are those 3 change in state law that are going to change the way we do things. One is that we are now responsible for producing the default budgets. The second one is that the voters have to vote on a potential tax cap on the school board side in the early November. And the third one is that the SAU budget, which normally is just presented as a fait accompli, is now, we are free to look at it and either, I guess we can't change it, but we can vote to recommend or not recommend. And then the town votes on it
And March.
in March.
So it's no longer incorporated into the operating budget for the school. It will be a separate warrant article. And all the towns that are in that SAU vote on that same article, and then they tally the combined votes from all the towns to say what was the total yeses and the total nos out of the total voters for that pool.
And this is from the state.
Yes.
Peter?
How is that default budget established? Just for my education.
Oh, God.
I
Please tell me.
would point that question to the SAU. The town staff is not going to answer that question.
Thank you. You're very,
Jared and I will be here in September to do default discussion.
Yes.
but it will be important for us to be aware.
Yeah.
Yes.
Does that actually mean that that default is actually something that we're responsible for as well?
I do not know. Vanessa's going to check
I'm
on
adding
that.
it to my
She's
list.
making a note right now.
Thank you.
Yeah, so we do have these 2 special meetings in September. One is the fire department, and the other one is Danielle and Doug are going to be talking to us about default budgets, because there's a lot of laws around default budgets. It's not just what we feel like. And as I mentioned in my email, that was the town and the school's safety net, and now we are responsible for it. So there's a big responsibility for us on the default budget side. I think the town has done, the select board has done a ton of work this summer, and I really appreciate it. I don't think I've ever seen a select board do this much, sort of taking everything apart and looking at it piece by piece and trying to figure out alternatives and ways to do it. So I really want to commend all of you for the work you guys have put in, because I know it's been a ton of work. In my most cynical heart of hearts, though, I have to, and I know the 5%, 5 to 7% is the starting point. I gotta ask, it was 5% last year, and I supported that budget, and the voters did not. So I guess I'm still wondering why do we think they're gonna support it this year? If they didn't
It's a starting point. That's not where we're targeting as the select board. That's where we're asking the department heads to target.
Okay,
We're not even through our first pass of the budget.
okay, that's
And-
great.
And it's 5% before CIP. So it's going to be way higher than that.
Okay,
Just to, 5% is great. I prefer lower, but it's going to be 5% before CIP.
Well, keep in mind, some of the CIP, we've already started figuring out how to smooth with the rentals. So
Yeah, hopefully some of this is done through
Yeah.
CRF.
I think the other piece is too, like in the DPW budget for like the 2 million in reclamation, we've asked for some of that to be broken out into different line items. So that way we can see where all those pieces are going. So there should be a little bit more clarity there too, across some of that and where it's being spent. So I think you'll have a lot more visibility into the budget and what those pieces are. I think collectively, the entire select board here, Mark, Allison, Richard, Jim, and myself, we go through finances every week, and we're constantly asking questions. We don't have doubts where a lot of those operational costs are going. The questions that we get are very succinct, and appreciate a lot of Danielle, Derek, and their team basically going through all that. I think that part of the reason why you're going to see some of that increase is because the CBAs that we have coming forward, right, that were voted on and approved last year. You're also going to see some recommendations probably around merit increases for the non-union, and maybe even like some COLA adjustments, because we have people that haven't had raises now for multi-years. And we need to keep in mind that as well.
Derek, I know we can't do this without having a whole new compensation study, but is there any way to make any sort of an estimate on where non-union employees now fall in that? I mean, 2 years ago, we were like right under 60% was where we
No.
kind of estimated.
So when the board did this in 2023, when they actually did the study, they targeted the 60th percentile. However, they implemented it a full year later. So we're probably around the 50th percentile. We have started to receive salary and wage compensation from other towns. We provide them our information. They provide us back. We're starting to creep down to some of the lower for our non-union employees.
Okay, so we're basically right back where we
Right back where we
started.
started.
Maybe not as bad, because on that one, there were some employees that were 20% under market, under the chosen target. So, but yeah, we are starting to creep in there, and then in departments like fire and police, where you have more hierarchical, where you've got a police officer, then a sergeant, then a lieutenant, then a captain, we are starting to see a little bit of compression.
It's a lot of compression.
Okay.
And I would say that, so the operational piece in that 5% is important to look at it from that perspective around, what's inflationary, what's also like due to the lack of increases for the employees. But on the CapEx side, the CIP, you'll have a holistic view of what those pieces are, which means that if you guys want to vote against those pieces and pull those out, you can pull them out. Like, that's a discussion. We're trying to focus on the things that are running the town, which is basically a business to us. But we're also trying to focus on those things that we know we need for replacement. We've looked at these rental agreements, the leases, the finances. If you want to say, hey, like no capital expenditures on these pieces, but we're all good for the rental, then we definitely can go after some of those.
So OpEx versus CapEx.
Yep, OpEx versus CapEx.
So question on OpEx, if we did rentals or leases, would that be moved to OpEx?
So the rentals and leases would be OpEx costs, right? But if we did a finance over a period of time, is that still CapEx, Danielle?
It's really where you want to put it in the budget.
Guys.
Yeah.
It can live in either one.
It can live in CIP or in the department. It's really up to the bid select.
Well, if we do the rental ones and the leases, for sure, those become OpExes. And those basically get smoothed out over a period of time. So it's not as big, and I think that that's where a lot of the issues have come from, is the capital expenditures. They haven't been so much the operational expenditures. I think last year got a little chaotic and maybe I'd say somewhat pedantic over $200 and $300 line items, when we should be focusing on what the real issues are that are causing the challenges.
So if we do go this leasing route, though, I mean, it sounds like we're talking about targeted leasing for certain classifications of vehicles, certain types of vehicles, and we're not doing it all at once. We would do it on a rollout basis, because there's some vehicles that are earlier in their lifespan that we own.
Correct.
So we're going to keep those until they die, and then we would look at leasing. So
Why
we're
would
not
we keep
looking
them
at
till
some
they
sort of
die?
massive fleet.
Until the replacement schedule, you start to phase them in.
Right. Right, okay. Okay, so I guess, so that is an answer of sorts, but I mean, I've been trying to having conversations with people in the community to find out why they voted the way they did. And because the truth is, as I think Jim kind of alluded to, people passed the school budget and they passed the teacher's contract, and they did not pass the town side. Why? It can't be a straight up partisan vote, because they would have voted the same way, one way or the other. It can't just be about money, because they voted for the most expensive things. So why? Why did they vote the way they voted? And I think that's a discussion that we should all be trying to have with people. My taxes are too high is not the same thing as I think the budget is inflated. Those are two different issues. And we need to get to the bottom of why people did not think that that town budget was worth voting for. And I mean, along those lines, I mean, this kind of came out in our last joint meeting, we talked about this a little bit, and I'm not trying to put anybody in the spot. I actually have a question for Josh in a minute, but first, I kind of have a question for Izzy. Okay, don't look at me like that. Okay, because I'm not trying to put you on the spot, but you stated in the last meeting, we were talking about line transfers. And I get your argument, and I've told you this, I can't quite put the dots together with the line transfers. But we've talked about, I get why line transfers are bad for default budgeting, because your spending becomes disconnected from your old budget. But I'm not sure why line transfers would indicate that the budget is inflated. Is there a relationship between those two?
Well, if it keeps happening year over year over year over year, then every time that the budget passes, the number's not correct. Either number, the number that you're transferring from, or the number that it's going to.
But it's not inflated, it's bottom line, so there's.
It's not bottom line if you can transfer 200 grand out of it.
No, that's exactly what that means. Is that you can transfer.
Well, let me just, I think, put an example. We've already default, so after we funded the roads a little bit less, the reclamation line, we've already taken $230,000 out of default budget reclamation and put it to something else. So what that tells me, there's too much money in reclamation. But when we come, because they're taking money out of it.
But wait, it's a
But
matter of
when we, hold
priorities.
on, when we come to budget season, and I'm cutting reclamation because I think that that's where all the money is. I don't support the roads. We're taking money out every single year. How many years have we taken money out of reclamation? It's been like 5.
But they're not using.
It's been a lot.
But I guess my question then would be, but taking money out of those lines doesn't mean it's not needed. It just means there was something that was a more critical need that wasn't funded.
You're just kicking the can down the road.
Well, no, you're kicking it to a different place because
Yeah.
priorities throughout the
Okay,
year may
look at the
change.
benefits line.
Which I think, by the way, has been fully expended this year.
So we are doing a full deep dive on benefits line. So we would, ask the budget committee to give that a fresh look. We are going to look at every individual and provide that information for a default budget to try and get more accurate numbers. Unfortunately, you're always going to have employees moving in and out of plans because of life changes or because of new hires or resignations or vacancies. That one is the hardest one we have to predict. But we are taking a completely fresh look at how we budget for that.
Okay.
Josh?
I know you're going to put me on the spot next, it's fine. I hear, Izzy and Joe, what you're saying. I don't know if that means the budget is inflated, because some of the years have been default budgets. I think last year collectively, the budget committee and the select board did a good job trying to move things around and take stuff out. I think both sides. We put items into the correct buckets last year, I thought, in the proposed budget. The default budget obviously went back to the default state. It's not inflated right now. We had to make priority decisions about where that money went. We actually cut things out. As Jim alluded to earlier, some things just didn't get done this year. We had to make a priority decision. And if we have to think about safety of the residents first and not doing the roads, even though, our residents want the roads done, safety of our residents comes first. That's a priority decision. Past years, I can't speak to all of them. I don't think every board member here can. I think certain decisions were made there too, but I would say they're priority decisions. What I would say if transfers are continuously happening, it's not good planning. They're basically not putting stuff into the right buckets. Doesn't mean that it's inflated. It means that we're not actually planning out for the year over year. I think this year we're trying to give you clarity on where all those buckets are. We're trying to make sure that stuff, even if it's like a large bucket, like in the reclamation, Joe, if we split that up, we're trying to say these pieces are actually stuff that we're really spending on maintenance on the roads. This part's the reclamation. Because the reality is, if you look at some of the select board meetings that we've had, we've talked about there wasn't a whole lot of reclamation done. We've done a lot more maintenance because we can't afford the reclamation because reclamation costs a lot more. So we're having to extend those dollars out and doing other things. So the reality is we haven't been doing reclamation, we've been doing a lot of road repair.
We need better planning.
We need better planning, and I think that that's what we're trying to do here. And if there's items that aren't planned well, then let's call them out. I think that's what we should be
Well,
doing.
like fire overtime, because then when I hear about that and see the transfer, it makes me think, do we not have enough firefighters? Or how much overtime
we
are we
don't.
paying?
Can I put a pin in that, Jessica? Because that's exactly what the fire chief is going to come and talk to us about.
Okay.
So before we dive into that, he's going to do a whole meeting about that, because I met with him, I think like in May, for that very reason. Brian came with me. Brian was with me.
Yeah.
And so he's going to come and talk to us about that specific thing.
And again, I trust the fire chief emphatically. He understands his business portion of the town, for sure.
Yeah. Okay. So I guess my point is, I didn't ask, I'm sorry. I think we do need to be having those conversations with people, not on social media, like face-to-face conversations with your neighbors to find out why they think what they think. Not to judge them or to berate them or anything else, but to get to the bottom of it. Or we're just going to find ourselves repeating this same pattern year after year after year. So that's kind of my 2 cents worth on that. The thing I wanted to not call Josh out on, but do a follow-up question on, after our last meeting, I did get a few comments from people who are like, well, we can't all be, you can't expect everybody to be in agreement 100% of the time. I mean, it's democracy. We should be disagreeing with one another. And Josh used the phrase silent dissent. And I started thinking about that a little bit and trying to get some clarity on that. He and I have talked about it a little bit. I think, and I want to turn it over to him too, but 50 years ago, there was sort of a gentleman's agreement when you served on a town committee. You would fight in your committee, but when that committee meeting was over and you went out and talked to the public, you supported what the committee did, whether you agreed or not. All those conventions have been thrown out the window. It's a new world. Nobody is living by those anymore. But I think it raises the question of, what does honorable dissent look like? And I think that's kind of where we're frustrated sometimes with each other. We don't agree, we have our disagreements in here, and we all get along, we all do fine, and then we get out there, and all hell breaks loose because honorable dissent has disappeared. So that's kind of, I wanted to see what Josh thought about this, though, because he's the one who initially brought it up.
Yeah, I said silent dissent because I think we have a responsibility to the town to work together and disagree here. And I see some disagreements start here, then immediately shut up, and then it goes off into Facebook someplace. I have no problem working with anybody here in the room. Izzy and Jessica and I, we've talked. Like, I'm happy to listen to good ideas. I think we all should be willing to listen to good ideas. To me, is like, this isn't about me or any one of you. This is about our town, having lived here a long period of time. So silent dissent to me is that basically we don't express our frustrations here and get them out on the table and basically like try to come to conclusion and then basically support whatever was voted on moving forward. I get that you may not have agreed with it in the vote. I get that it may not have gone your way. But collectively, like, the mass majority of the people in here voted together in some way, shape, or form. So we should act that way. I know that I do it in my business, in my company. I tell my team the same thing. Like, at the end of the day, and my boss tells me the same thing, at the end of the day, when a decision is made, everybody walks out of this room together and we push for it. I don't feel that here. I feel that there's a lot of issues that occur, and that's what's causing a lot of the issues in the town. Collectively, we all live here together. We should be working together. I don't want to have confrontation. That's why I'm willing to call any one of you and talk to you. I mean, I want to find out what you're thinking and what the problems are, because the best idea should win for this town.
Laura?
Well, and I think part of it is that thing that I think usually say we're going to do is, even if you personally are not going to vote in a certain way, you came together as the collective to, whatever you do in your own personal thing is fine, but as the collective group, we came to this decision and we are united. If you're voting for or against on your own personal ballot, that actually should have no bearing. I mean, isn't that kind of what we always go back to, is like, this isn't about what you personally want for your family, yourself, your finances. it's what you think is collectively best. And those are the two things that I think if we had a little more separation of that, and of course, there's the understanding that you are here in good faith doing what is best for the town without a different motive, but we don't know what's in people's heads. But if you can separate your personal self and wants and needs versus the collective town, I think that maybe does take a lot of that away, because you're still united. And then you do your vote how you do your vote. Nobody knows otherwise except your family and your friends. Like, I don't know. I think that's part of getting like all mixed in.
Yeah. Other comments?
I'll just say this out loud. Jim and I don't always agree. Like, we go at it with each other sometimes. But at the end of the day, we're trying to do what's best for the town.
So if I vote no on something in here, I'm supposed to go outside and say, oh, it's all right, it's good.
No, I don't mean that, Izzy. What I mean, though, is I expect you to go out there and say to someone, well, yeah, this is what the committee decided. I didn't agree with it because of X, Y, and Z. But that X, Y, and Z had better be accurate.
And said in this room, too.
It can't be, well, Josh,
Find
what you
somewhere
say
that
in
I
this
said
room.
something on Facebook about.
We're not,
I'm not-
it's
I
not
know, you're not on
personal.
Facebook, but I think, I mean,
It
to
gets
go out,
personal.
the voter manipulation.
Oh, I know, Izzy.
The voter manipulation, for me, on either side, I cannot tolerate it anymore. Give people the accurate, I feel like that's part of our job as elected officials, is to give people accurate information so they can make their own informed decision.
100%.
That's what I'm saying.
And when that doesn't happen, that's the not in good faith
Yeah.
that I mean.
Yeah.
You know, I'm listening to this, and I spent 12 years in the legislature, and I learned pretty quickly that all you have is your reputation, you know? That's all you have. And you know, Joe. And if you're saying things behind people's back, it gets around quick and everything, you know? And then all of a sudden, nobody's talking to you, and, you know, you're not effective. You're not effective. And I think, you know, there's a lot of social media crap going on. We all know that. But really, it all comes down to us as people. You know, you're going to treat everybody with the respect that you want to be treated with. I do. And so I try to treat people that way, you know? And, you know, we all talk about the country's going to hell or whatever, but it really comes down to us as individual people. How do we want to be seen by other people? How do we want to feel when we go to bed at night? You know, are we honorable? Are we honorable people? That's our job. And hopefully, you know, that's why we're elected here, because we are people with character, and you know, and we will work together. We make an oath to work together and do what's best for the town. I get it that it's very, very easy to rip somebody up when you go outside. Everything's impersonal and everything, but it really isn't. You know, it's up to us as individuals, and so that's the way I look at life. You don't necessarily have to agree with me, but it's worked for me pretty well, and I want to be treated that way. So I'll treat you that way. You treat me that way.
I honestly think we're all here for the same reason. We want to help and we want to give the best quality services, but also protect the taxpayer, and we have to figure out how to do that balance.
I think, though, what Elizabeth's saying, and if it's not, tell me, but it does sometimes seem like that when we're here, but then it very much doesn't outside of here.
And it's not all just one-sided. It's not all
Let
one-sided.
me just ask a clarifying point. So if I'm sitting here through budget deliberations and I make multiple motions that fail, which is fine, I don't take it personal, like people think what they think, and then we get to the point where we're at the final budget and it passes, right? We recommend it, but there's like a sizable minority that decides like, you know, this probably isn't right for Goffstown. We're expected to not speak out against what the
No,
budget
I did not
is.
say that. In fact, I said that was the old convention several decades ago.
Okay.
But that's not the way it works now. I would not expect you to. I would not be comfortable for myself saying I'm not going to speak out against something if the committee goes in a different way. All I'm saying is that I expect every one of us to be honest about our reasons, to not try and exaggerate them, to not cherry pick our arguments, to not try and get people whipped up for whatever reason, and that cuts both ways. Oh, you're losing all your services. Oh, you're going to have to forfeit your house because your taxes are so high. It doesn't matter either way. Be honest. I expect people to be honest with each other. And I think Laura's right in that we do a pretty good job in here. We have good discussions. We talk to one another. But then we get out there, and I feel like, and maybe I'm hypersensitive because I'm already seeing it happen with the state reps election, right? We're already seeing it happen all over Facebook. And if there's anything I'm done with more than Facebook, it's partisanship. I have had it. I don't care about either one of those parties. And, you know, it's just, it's time to move on. It's boring. We need to get something done. And we need to start being honest with each other and treating each other with some respect.
Well, first of all, you said the old convention from decades ago was to advocate for the committee's position as an individual. I would say I started 8 years ago on the budget committee, and that was actually one of the first things that I was told by quite a few members of that budget committee at the time, was that that would be my responsibility. But putting that aside, I know it seems odd in a democracy on its face, but it's actually not that crazy to expect individual members who have no sole authority to accurately, not advocate for, but to accurately represent the committee's position. And that means honesty, as has already been mentioned, but it also means not undermining other people's logic. You can't say that what they want is to price people out of their homes. You have to say, the point of this vote was to support X, Y, and Z funding priorities, and leave it at that. You don't have to full-throatedly advocate for it, but you do have to accurately explain why it happened.
I think accurate's the key word in that. 'Cause I still can't get over a very large sign that
Okay,
did
we're not going to go there.
But it wasn't accurate. That's
Is
what
that
we're
what
talking
this
about.
Are
whole
we,
discussion
wait a
is
second,
about?
are we done with the
Accurate.
lecture? Because I'm getting lectured right now.
Yeah, okay, so, yeah, and I think I've made my point, and I have tried to be even-handed on it, because I do mean it from either direction. But I think, all right, Peter, please, I'm going to call on you, but please don't make me regret it.
I can't guarantee that.
All right, well, we need to
But
wrap it
I do have
up.
to ask a clarifying question.
All right.
To some extent, like, we've been sitting here saying like, well, these things happen on Facebook, these things happen on Facebook. I'm not asking us to bring up specific examples necessarily, but I truly do not go on Facebook. Like, I'm not kidding when I say, like, I just don't go on there. So when people around this table are like, oh my goodness, what's going up there? In fact, the one thing I brought up here at the table about Facebook was because someone else talked to me about it, right? So I really don't look at that. That said, we're saying that, like, I do kind of have a problem with what Josh is saying, to some extent.
No, it's good. I actually appreciate you saying you have a problem.
But I have to say it here, like, the reason I have a problem with what you said about the silent dissent is because I couldn't put a specific example to it, right? Are we alluding to certain people being involved in things, or is there a specific thing? Because if we're specifically not, this is the issue that I have. I had an issue when we had people vote against something and not explain their votes last year, right? Really, honestly, you should be able to explain your vote, whether you're voting yes or no. But in particular, when someone voted against something and never explained why and never asked any questions about those things, that was an issue for me. I should have questioned that at the table here. I
Although,
didn't go to Facebook, but
honestly, nobody is required to justify their vote.
that is fine, but we're talking about trying to behave in good faith and do the best work we can here. So what I'm trying to figure out is, what does Josh mean when he's saying,
I mean exactly
Like-
that. When people are not explaining what they're voting for, which they do not have to explain why they voted a particular way, but then they are willing to go on Facebook and explain all kinds of things that also may not even be accurate. That is what I would consider to be silent dissent.
Okay, thank you.
And I think any one of you should be able to work together and talk to one another and ask each other questions. Like, my conversations with Jessica and Izzy are mine, but I wouldn't go and share them with everybody unless I asked if that was okay. I also am willing to say anything that I said to them to any one of you, because that's how I work. And in this committee, that's how we should be working. Just like in the select board, Jim and I have some very honest conversations with one another, and I sometimes don't like what he has to say, and sometimes he doesn't like what I have to say.
But I'm always right.
That is true most of the time, Jim. That is true. But I mean, that's what we're fundamentally here to do, is work together. So I'm not looking to lecture anybody, Joe.
Thank you. I don't want to get to the point where, like, I have to apologize for being here at all the meetings, by the way, and being an active contributor. I would say I ask more questions than almost anybody else, and then speak more than anybody else, definitely. And then go to deliberative and be expected, first of all, I didn't speak against the budget in deliberative, so I think that's a key point. But then be expected to not campaign for the taxpayer, for the conservative. Like, I won't apologize for that. Like, if that's the implication from this silent dissent conversation, like, I have always been, like, I vote the way I vote in committee, and then I campaign the way I campaign. And if we're expected not to campaign, like, that's kind of crazy.
No.
I'm
I'm
not
saying that.
apologizing for the position that,
No,
you know,
I'm
there's a
not.
minority on this committee have, so.
It's the accurate explanation. Like, if you go out and say, yes, the committee did vote as a whole, I didn't vote because of, like Richard mentioned it, Elizabeth mentioned it, this, and this. If you choose to do that, you can choose not to and just keep it yourself. Or if, like, it's fine to not and to say what you want to say and campaign for it. But to have it be an accurate representation of the conversations that were had, the things that happened, because we know, like we joke about the people watching at home, like, we know not everyone's paying attention, and they shouldn't have to necessarily, because that is why we exist, so people that don't feel like they can take all this have something to look to. But it's that accurateness and that not undermining when everything should be said out here that people want to say, that people need to say, because then there's no real reason to undermine on, I don't know, I'm not on Facebook anymore either, so I don't know what's being said, in those other ways, because it does undermine what the committee's doing as a whole, not even what I think what the decision we came to was, but what we're trying to do. That's how I view it, because I think we do say our opinions, we come to our vote, and we laugh after, and we're like, okay, well, that's what it was. No surprises, whatever, you know. But we are still trying to accomplish something as a team, and not to undermine that. If you want to stick by your vote, I'm like, absolutely. But it's the teamwork part that then you go against, not you personally, but people go against and say these things, and like, where did that come from? I thought we had it out at the meeting. I don't know, that kind of stuff is the undermining of the committee, not the, like, decision that you may disagree with or agree with. The work.
I feel like we're like skirting around what wants to.
I don't know, I'm not on Facebook, so I don't know what's happening.
I'm like, this is my second meeting. I feel like.
Because people are online, I mean, historically, one reason why I'm not on Facebook anymore is because people are online. It's the same nonsense, it's the same people, and it's just aggravating each other, and if someone pops in and says, like, actually, if you watch the meeting, this, and this happened, then there's somehow still a disagreement when there are facts and there are not. Like, it's just nonsense, it's the same thing over and over, hence why I haven't been on Facebook in so long. But I imagine it's that type of thing still continuing, and why are we still doing that, because to what end?
I don't know who's on Facebook talking about budget stuff, but I think.
Or people.
Oh, well.
I mean, I don't know either,
control
because I'm not on
people.
Facebook.
But I think the point is, be respectful of each other, and if you have something to say it here.
Yeah, 100%.
100%.
Okay, so, just because I feel like the first meeting we talked about this, now this one, I hope.
There were a lot of bad
happening.
feelings after the
Okay.
last budget season. There was a lot of animosity after that last election. And
Then let's get it all out now.
I think we probably have without
Okay.
coming to fistfights. So I'm not sure how productive this is becoming. So I think we've probably said what we need to say, and we need to wrap it up. So are there any final
details or information that needs to come before the budget committee.
When do you need the tasks completed?
Oh, well,
Well, this Friday, the email, and then talk with you and Danielle.
Well, no, we don't have to do an email by this Friday because Izzy is going to do it.
well,
what if
anybody
other
else,
people want
anybody
it?
else, anybody who's interested should
I clapped
email
for
me.
him. I figured.
Because they have other things to schedule.
So, but in all likelihood, yeah, Izzy's going to do it. But yeah, so just by the time by the time the town budget gets to us, we need to have this issue about the leasing thing resolved.
Okay.
Because it does keep coming up over and over again. And this, not that this would happen, but this would be an example. If you guys go through this whole thing and it never really gets resolved, and then the select board does one thing, and then one of us gets on Facebook and says, oh, this is such a crock, and they should have done this, and all the reasons, I don't know, exaggerated reasons about why the select board screwed this up, when maybe they didn't. They just had a different opinion.
Well, I'll tell you right now, if I'm working with them, we figure it out, no matter what happens, we tried. That's
Yeah.
all I'm gonna say.
Okay.
Okay,
Okay, so that's all we have,
I
right?
think that's all we have.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thanks, everybody.